What happens when a beloved music icon walks into what should be a light-hearted morning chat, only to be blindsided by an interviewer determined to tear him down on live television? In less than 40 seconds, a single barbed remark would turn a routine promo segment into one of the most explosive clashes in daytime TV history, leaving viewers stunned and one host facing the fiercest backlash of her career. The day began like any other inside ITV studios. Sir Cliff Richard, the legendary singer whose career had spanned over 6 decades, arrived early for his scheduled appearance on Lorraine. He was there to promote a new record, an album of classic covers that highlighted the warmth and strength of his voice. At 78, Cliff remained one of Britain's most treasured performers, admired not just for his music, but for his kindness, grace, and professionalism. Backstage, he was his usual self, charming with the crew, remembering names, asking after families. Cliff Richard never behaved like the superstar he was. For the production team, it promised to be another uplifting segment, the kind that brightened viewers' mornings. But Lorraine Kelly seemed off. Crew members noticed her sharp tone during rehearsals, her short temper with the technical staff, an edge in her voice that didn't belong. Whether it was nerves, stress, or something deeper, there was tension in the air as the cameras prepared to roll. Cliff settled into the guest chair, relaxed, ready to chat about his career and his love of music. After thousands of interviews over the years, this was supposed to be routine. Lorraine shuffled her notes with a focus that felt almost aggressive. The floor manager counted down. The red light blinked on. Good morning, and welcome back. I'm joined now by music legend Cliff Richard, who has a brand new album out. Lorraine began. Professional, polished, exactly what audiences expected. Thank you for having me, Lorraine. Always a pleasure, Cliff replied, his trademark warmth filling the studio. But Lorraine's next words landed differently. Now, Cliff, this new album. It's all covers, isn't it? Not exactly pushing boundaries, are we? A flicker of surprise crossed Cliff's face. He steadied himself. Well, I think there's artistry in interpretation, Lorraine. These songs have meant so much to people for decades. I wanted to bring my own perspective to them. Sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is honor the classics. Lorraine leaned back, a smirk tugging at her lips. Right, but some might say it's a bit safe, isn't it? Playing it safe when perhaps at this stage in your career, you should be taking risks. The remark cut through the air. Cliff's smile held, but his eyes betrayed confusion. This wasn't the friendly exchange he'd expected. I've never been afraid of risks, he answered firmly. I've explored rock, pop, gospel, even musical theater. This album is about celebrating the songs that shaped music history. Lorraine didn't let up. Her voice sharpened. But surely, Cliff, at your age, isn't it more honest to admit you're just leaning on nostalgia? Cashing in on memories instead of creating something new? The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the warmth of a Lorraine Kelly interview. It felt like an ambush. Cliff's reply carried a new steel. Music is timeless, Lorraine. Whether I'm 28 or 78, good music connects. I'm not cashing in. I'm sharing what I love. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. She glanced at her notes, then delivered the line that silenced the entire studio. Speaking of your age, Cliff, don't you think it's time to step aside? Surely you've had your turn. Isn't it time to bow out gracefully and let younger artists have the spotlight? The words hit like a slap. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the crew froze. Cliff Richard, always dignified, always gracious, sat motionless for a moment, visibly stunned. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm, carrying an unmistakable edge. I beg your pardon? Lorraine pressed on, relentless. You've been in this business over 60 years. Isn't that enough? Wouldn't it be more graceful to step aside and let someone else have their chance? The air in the studio dropped 10 degrees. Cliff straightened in his chair, his legendary composure hardening. The friendly chat had become something else entirely. An interrogation. live on national television. Lorraine, he said at last, his voice low, steady but burning beneath the surface. I came here today to talk about music. To share something positive with your viewers. I don't know why you feel the need to attack me personally, but this isn't what I signed up for. But Lorraine wasn't finished. Cliff's obvious discomfort seemed to fuel her. She leaned forward, her voice laced with venom. Oh, come now, Cliff. Surely you can handle a few honest questions. Or has success made you too sensitive for real journalism? The words cut deep. Cliff Richard, a man who had weathered decades of critics and controversies, who had faced screaming fans and skeptical journalists, was now being ridiculed on live television for simply doing what he loved. Real journalism? Cliff's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his legendary calm. This isn't journalism, Lorraine. This is cruelty, dressed up as cleverness, and I can't understand why. The audience shifted uneasily, their murmurs growing louder. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was humiliation, and it was painful to watch. Lorraine smiled, but it was cold, sharp. Getting a bit worked up, aren't we, Cliff? Maybe that's the problem with your generation. You can't handle an honest conversation anymore. Her condescension hung in the air like poison. The floor manager looked nervously to the control room, waiting for a signal to cut to break. But none came. The cameras kept rolling. Cliff drew a slow, steady breath. He had spent decades mastering composure, but his patience was gone. Lorraine, I've been giving interviews since before you were born. I've handled tough questions, difficult topics, even hostile interviewers. But this? His voice sharpened. This isn't interviewing. This is mean-spirited. Mean-spirited? Lorraine let out a brittle laugh. No, Cliff. I'm the only one here brave enough to ask what others are too polite to say. Maybe that makes me the only honest person in the room. Honest about what exactly? Cliff shot back, his voice stronger now, his legendary politeness cracking under the assault. Honest about the fact that you think I don't belong here? That I'm too old to matter? That my music no longer deserves a place? What's your point, Lorraine? The audience fell silent. Every person in the studio could feel it. This had stopped being television and had become something uglier, a public dismantling. For a moment, something flickered across Lorraine's face. Hesitation, maybe doubt, but she doubled down. My point is that maybe it's time for honesty in this business. Maybe it's time to admit that clinging on forever isn't admirable. Maybe it's time to retire gracefully instead of desperately trying to stay relevant. The cruelty of it left the room ice cold. Cliff Richard, who had built his career on grace, who had never created scandal, who had always lifted others up, sat frozen in silence. Desperate attempts, he repeated barely above a whisper. Is that what you think this is? Desperation? Well, what would you call it? Lorraine pressed. You're nearly 80, Cliff. Isn't it a little sad? Still competing with artists a third of your age? The audience gasped. It was breathtaking, the malice of it. Cliff Richard wasn't being questioned about music. He was being attacked for daring to exist past a certain age. Slowly, with deliberate control, Cliff rose from his chair. The movement was quiet but absolute. Everyone could feel the shift. I think we're done here, Lorraine. His voice carried a finality that silenced even the crew. This wasn't the wounded man from a moment ago. This was Sir Cliff Richard reclaiming his dignity. Oh, walking away now, are we? Lorraine's voice dripped with mockery. Can't handle a real conversation? Cliff turned to her, his eyes blazing. Real conversation? Lorraine, I've had real conversations with journalists all over the world. About my music, my faith, my failures, my triumphs. That's conversation. What you've done here isn't journalism. It's playground bullying with cameras rolling. Bullying? Lorraine shot back, her voice rising. I'm asking legitimate questions about your career choices. No, Cliff said, his tone unwavering, stronger with each word. You haven't asked me a single real question about my music, or my career, or anything that matters. From the moment this interview began, all you've done is insult me. And I have no idea why. The control room was in chaos. Producers barked conflicting orders, unsure whether to cut to commercial, keep rolling, or attempt damage control. But the confrontation was too raw, too electric. Nobody could look away. Lorraine's trademark confidence was slipping. Her smirk faltered, and for the first time that morning, doubt flickered across her face. I think you're being overly sensitive, Cliff. These are just normal interview questions. Normal. Cliff's voice cracked, his disbelief ringing through the studio. You call that normal? You asked me if I should step aside because of my age. You called my work desperate attempts to stay relevant. You suggested I was too old to make music. Tell me, Lorraine, what world are those normal questions in? The audience shifted, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others looked away in embarrassment, but all were riveted. Lorraine straightened her notes, trying to mask her unease. Well, perhaps I could have phrased things differently, but the underlying questions are valid. Valid. Cliff leaned forward, his composure gone, replaced by righteous fury. Valid according to who? Who appointed you the arbiter of when someone should stop doing what they love? Who gave you the right to tell anyone, me or anyone else, that they're too old to create, too old to share their gifts? I'm just reflecting what a lot of people think, Lorraine said, though her voice carried less authority now. Are you? Cliff pressed, his eyes locked on hers. Because in my experience, the people who love music, the ones who understand what it means to create, don't believe there's an expiration date on artistry. They know music doesn't belong to an age. It belongs to the human spirit. The words hung in the air, powerful and undeniable. Lorraine's face flushed red. The cracks in her polished television persona were widening. She had expected Cliff to shrink under the weight of her attacks. Instead, she was staring down a man who had found his voice, and the room was with him. Look, Cliff, I think you're taking this far too personally. Lorraine tried again, her voice trembling now. This is just television. This is how interviews work nowadays. No, Lorraine, Cliff replied, his voice low, steady, and devastating. This is not how interviews work. This is how bullies work. The words cut like a knife. The audience gasped. The balance of power had shifted completely. Where Lorraine had once controlled the rhythm of the exchange, she now looked small, cornered, almost desperate. I've been doing television since you were a child, Cliff continued, his voice rising. I know what a real interview looks like. And this isn't it. Lorraine gave a shaky laugh, though there was no humor in it. Oh, come on now, don't be so dramatic. We're just having a chat. A chat? Cliff's eyebrows arched. You call telling someone they should retire because they're old a chat? You call dismissing a lifetime of music as desperate a chat? Lorraine, I don't know what's happened to you, but this isn't journalism. This isn't even conversation. This is cruelty, plain and simple. And it stops now. The studio was spellbound. Audience members were openly nodding, some even clapping softly despite the tension. The floor manager was gesturing wildly for a cut, but no one could bring themselves to interrupt. This was live television at its most unfiltered, and Cliff Richard, calm, dignified, and furious, was in full command. Lorraine tried one last time, her voice thin, almost pleading. Well, I think our viewers deserve honest discussions about the entertainment industry. Honest discussions? Cliff's voice thundered now. Then let's be honest. You didn't invite me here to talk about my music. You invited me here to tear me down. You told me I should step aside because of my age. You said I was cashing in on nostalgia. You called my work desperate. And now, millions of people have just heard you say it. Lorraine flinched visibly. For the first time, she looked less like the confident host, and more like someone cornered, exposed. The studio fell utterly silent. Cliff stood, his presence commanding, his dignity intact. The audience was on his side. The cameras were still rolling, and Lorraine Kelly, one of the most established faces in British television, was suddenly the one on trial. Even the camera operators had stopped moving. Everyone was frozen, riveted by the sheer weight of the moment unfolding before them. "And you know what the saddest part is?" Cliff said, his voice softening now, tinged with something deeper than anger. "I thought we were friends. I thought you respected what I've given my life to. I never once imagined you looked at me as someone who should just fade away because I've gotten older." Lorraine's mask slipped. Her face, once composed and polished, now carried the unmistakable look of someone unraveling on live television. "Cliff, no, that's not what I meant," she stammered. "Then what did you mean, Lorraine?" Cliff pressed, his tone calm but unrelenting. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounded an awful lot like you think I should stop making music because of my age. It sounded like you believe my fans are misguided for still supporting me. It sounded like contempt, pure and simple." "That's not true," Lorraine whispered, her voice so faint the microphones barely caught it. "Then why say it? Why spend the last 10 minutes tearing me down for daring to keep doing the thing I love? Why make me feel as though I should be ashamed of my passion, ashamed of my art, ashamed of still being here?" The question landed like a final blow. Lorraine opened her mouth but found nothing. No defense, no excuse, not even a deflection. For the first time in her long career, she sat in utter silence. Cliff adjusted his jacket, straightened his shoulders, and turned directly toward the camera. His eyes burned with conviction. To anyone watching who wonders if they're too old to chase their dreams, too old to share their gifts, hear me clearly. Age is just a number. Passion has no expiration date. And you should never, never let anyone convince you to stop doing what you love, simply because you've been doing it for a long time. He turned back once more to Lorraine, who remained frozen in her chair. "Thank you, Lorraine, for reminding me why I love making music. Because music brings joy. It connects us across generations. It reminds us of what we share as human beings. Those are values worth defending at any age." And with that, Cliff Richard rose and walked off the set. Lorraine Kelly sat in stunned silence, millions watching as her career was forever altered. Not by the questions she asked, but by 37 seconds of cruelty that exploded in her hands.